A little Francisco Link right there by the sobriquet Saga Boy, Tears of a Nation. And we are in the midst of the Takeover. In studio with me, Donna McCurvin and Phil Vassell of the Canadian Black Music Archives. Storme is in the house. Storme, is any of this stuff interesting to you?
She's working on it. She's working on it. She's working on it. I think the important thing, though, Storme, and any other young person that's listening out there, for us, for Donna and I, when we started the Canada Black Music Archives, it was important for our children as well. You know, I have two daughters, Donna and I, and we felt that they have to see themselves when they look at Canadian history. And Michael Williams said something that was very interesting to me. You know, I know of his history here in Montreal. And we had many conversations. And one of the quotes that I've taken from him is this. He says, Black music history is Canadian music history. And I think that is so true. The problem that I think Dr. Williams revealed is that there's so little scholarship in this area. And she's given us a challenge with this conversation here today that we got to go out and do some work.
Rapidly, I hear the ticking in my ears behind me.
She's laid the groundwork. I think you've laid the groundwork. Yes, you weren't dealing with music as a specific area, because all of this started out with demography work, is my understanding.
Yes, and that came out of an institutional request, because at that time, the Quebec Human Rights Commission was trying to figure out why Black people kept coming to them and saying, they won't rent me an apartment.
Oh, really?
And they kept, originally, what would happen is an agent would take the file, and then another agent would take another file of another Black person. Somebody finally one day say, wait a second, these are not isolated cases. What's going on in the housing market? And nobody had an answer. So they had Esmeralda Thornhill, Dr. Esmeralda Thornhill, knew of my work, which was in its infancy. I mean, when we look at where I'm at today. And she said, why don't you approach them? I've laid the seeds there, and see if you could help them to understand racism in the housing market, totally outside of anything I've ever done. So I sat down and I had a conversation with the woman who was interviewing for that. And I said, you know what? I can tell you what's going on in the housing market. I said, but I'm not going to tell you what's happening now, today. I said, I'm a historian. I said, I'm going to look at the roots of it. Why we have today, the situation today, probably comes out of centuries of exclusion and social isolation. And she looked at me for a minute and she said, okay. And it was that affirmation from her, that assent. And I just started, because I was always a collector, I started going through reams of my books and articles and papers, and I started piecing together a narrative. So if anybody out there has Blacks in Montreal, not The Road to Now, which you have here, but the very first book, that came out of that discussion I had at the Human Rights Commission, the Quebec Human Rights Commission. And when I went back to her, and I gave it to her, she read it, and then we had a further conversation, and she said to me at that time, so it would have been about 1985, and she said, I've read this, and it cannot sit on our shelves. Everybody in Quebec should read this.
That's pretty bold of her.
Absolutely. And so, you know, just out of school, just out of my BA, I gave her the manuscript. And lo and behold, the book you have, the original book, Blacks in Montreal, is actually a book published by the Quebec Human Rights Commission. They felt it was so important to bring that story out. Not only did it serve their purpose so that now any agent, any person that gets a file of racism in housing, they can point to the book because the data is there. The information is there. It's rich with statistics. It's rich with data, okay? But also, it helps the agents to educate the judges who are adjudicating. So again, it's not an isolated incident. We have a narrative which explains why 200 years later, they're still not renting to Blacks. They're still closing the doors. There's still those barriers, all right? And it's laid out for them, page after page after page. Change the case, change the course at the Human Rights Commission because of it.
Was this happening elsewhere? In other places, other provinces? Because it seems like that was groundbreaking work.
Well, here in Quebec it was.
Yes.
Here in Quebec. The book was groundbreaking because of the effect at the Quebec Human Rights Commission and its impact, which was almost immediate, like an earthquake. But it was not the end of my narrative, which is why 9 years later I put this together.
Book.
Because that was the demography. And for those of you listening, like, what is she talking about when she says demography?
Break it down
because
for us.
I'll break it down. I always break it down. I'm a teacher. Demography. When I'm talking about the Jamaicans came in between this year and that year, and they moved into Côte-de-Neige, or they went into LaSalle, and then the Bajans when they came in 19 and they were and so I'm looking at it from a group perspective, right? I'm identifying some characteristics of them, and I did it by ethnicity. All right. And so that's what a demography is. So I called it historical demography when I was writing it, but the title eventually became an urban demography because I focused specifically on Montreal, not Quebec, right? Not the regions, but Montreal. So an urban demography. And so you can actually track it through that book, not this one, but Black books, a Black book that will tell you about the migrations of different ethnic groups coming into the city and their impact on the housing market.
So I want to ask, rooting it back into music, because we do know when a people move, I know of countless Jamaicans who, some of them bring seeds, some of them bring their favorite food. We walk with our food. We walk with our fashion. We walk with our music. We walk with our stories. And so much of this is not being preserved. How do we get individuals now to do that? And in particular, some of our elders and their kids who are taking care of elderly parents or dying parents to stop throwing away pictures, music, files, and get them to understand just how important these artifacts are to documenting not only our music, but our impact and our time here.
It would be absolutely wonderful if we had spent much more time as parents telling our kids to get into things like sociology and history so that we could track it ourselves. It would be a great companion to my book would have been a study at when the Jamaicans went here, what stores open, what restaurants open, what Jamaican businesses came into that area. How did that have, what was the effect with other ethnic groups already in the neighborhood, and how that changed the retail landscape in the city. That would have been a great complement and companion to that kind of, but you need that kind of scholarship and awareness of where the sources are. How do you track that? We don't. We spent a lot of time just saying, the ultimate, and we want our kids to be doctors and lawyers, but there's so many other things that make a culture, that bring a culture together, richness of a culture, right? That we can identify. It's how we understand ourselves as well. So it's the music and it's our cultural productions, but it's also our food. It's the festivals. It's the way in which we marry Caribbean, in this case, because of the dominance of the Caribbean population that came into Montreal, and the kinds of things that were merged and other things that remain distinct to each ethnic group. I mean, this is in and of itself is a great, would be a great doctoral thesis for somebody interested in understanding how ethnicity is, inculcated within the Canadian, quote, mosaic or as you will. I think it's, there's so many opportunities still left to be told, and I love that, what you just said, because me, as an archivist, actually, that's a terrible start to the sentence. As an archivist, I feel it is so critical for us to capture the kinds of things you were talking about are called artifacts. Right? We need those artifacts because, again, they complement the written word, which is sort of one-dimensional, and you need the richness of that comes from cups and plates and the different artifacts, the remnants of when they had a store and they had this pot there and it did that or whatever. Like, it's so critical for us to understand that we may have artifact history in our own home, our parents' home. Why don't you capture that if you can? Right? But no, we don't. We're not thinking that. We're so oral sometimes.
I have to say it's more than a case of not thinking that, because from my own experience, when you talk about, the world of archives, a lot of people's eyes glaze over it. It's just not part of our culture. And if you don't understand it, then you don't understand why it's important.
But it's so sexy, though. I find it so sexy, and I God, this is what I've been doing at my low level in the last 3-4 years, right? And I can take you right back to when my mother passed, and the 5 sisters were going through the closet. We waited about 18 months and we went through it, and then with it came the stories. She wore this hair, you remember this and that and that, and oh, I hated mom and that and this and that. But then it happens with the records, the songs, boom boom time. That was why we started the show. We used to say we like to play the music that reminds you what you were wearing when, who were you dating, how long was your hair, right? So there is a sexiness, but it's for us to go and sell it. So what are some of the practical tips that you would say to the listeners right now? And I just sort of feel calm and feel that there's a quietness over the city and people are really listening today. Because usually when we have long form interviews on my show, 1 million people are texting me going, when are you going to play music? And I haven't gotten one single text.
Amen.
So I think we are doing something here. How can we talk about the music that we grew up listening here, the clubs, we started it here, but in very practical ways. And I guess I want to even go back to a time which, for me and for a lot of people, Expo 67 and the music that came out of there. I wondered, what can you tell us about the impact of Expo 67 on the Black community?
Well, I'd have to say that it really speaks of your age, because I was a child. I mean, I was like 8 or 9 years old when Expo 67
I was
came out.
1, Dorothy. Leave me alone. You started.
I remember Expo 67, not from a music perspective, but the effect on the community. And I was right in the midst of, quote, that urban renewal. Didn't have the same effect in my world and in my community, because there was always that sort of contrast, right, between let's celebrate, we are the world, and the wonder of that and the joy of that, with we got to move again. They're tearing down our house.
Yes, you spoke at length about that in your book.
Yes, I do. So at that time, in prep for Expo 67, was really for us, for a lot of Blacks in the community, a period of trauma. Because they had to leave what for them were to be generational homes in order for the urban renewal to take place in the Southwest. Just for the people that are listening and may not be aware, when the Ville Marie Expressway was built, it split the community and it caused what would be called dislocation of hundreds of families, not just Black families, but the effect within the Black community was so significant because that was the core neighborhood. So you had Italians there, you had Chinese there, we had Finns there, we had French there. Well, they moved. They went to other parts of the community, other parts of the island, and joined other clusters that were part of their identification. Blacks in Little Burgundy, which was the home that had kept that jazz community to the east alive, they were the ones that really felt it in such a way that its identity splintered. And so you had at the same time that identity is splintering in that physical neighborhood, which today we call Little Burgundy, but it wasn't called Little Burgundy in those days, but which splintered. At the same time, you got hundreds of West Indians getting off the plane, but they're not going into the old traditional neighborhood.
Yeah.
They're going elsewhere because there's no housing there, and it is a totally different environment.
The university ghettos that
Totally. And they had no, even today,
connection.
They never went into Little Burgundy because it didn't exist for them. And so, yeah, that really changed the way in which we look. So now I think for some people, it's always brand new to be talking about jazz, to be talking about that music era, which happened, 2-3 decades earlier, because they didn't come into it and embrace it. It wasn't part of their understanding or their historical reality in the city.
As an outsider, I've read quite a bit about Little Burgundy, and it was the home of jazz and the Black community. What remains of that today? Because I've heard the word gentrification.
Yeah, you can call it gentrification, but I'm going to disabuse you of something right now.
Go ahead.
Jazz was never in Little Burgundy.
Now,
You got that sound? You got that?
Downtown.
It was never in Little Burgundy. You know where jazz was? And I want everybody to think. Just close your eyes for a second, all you Montrealers listening. You know where the Bell Center is?
Yeah.
That's Mountain in St. Catherine? Mountain in St. Antoine? Where was Rockhead's Paradise?
Right there.
Thank you.
Right there.
That's not Little Burgundy.
Where did Burgundy start? Guy?
Thank you.
Guy Street.
And goes east Atwater.
The West.
Oh, sorry, West Atwater.
Yeah,
Yes,
West.
you're right.
Yeah.
West Atwater.
So St. Martin and all those streets that way.
This was the bedroom community. Well, Little Burgundy was because this was the workers, right? So the workers left there and would walk over Mountain, go Peel, and they'd be around that, or the Cafe Saint Michel and whatever, right? And they're only at that point, you're only 2-3 blocks from the CNR and Windsor Station. Right?
And then it continued east to St. Laurent and then up to St. Catherine Street. So that's where those clubs were.
I might tell people all the time, it wasn't in Little Burgundy.
Yeah, it's true, eh?
Yes, my friend.
Because when you think of it,
Thank
it's
you.
such a... But it's such an easy mistake to make.
Of course it is.
Because
It
people
is.
consider all down there and they see near
I've been disabused,
Burgundy.
Pat,
Yeah.
because all my thinking up until now was Little Burgundy
Yeah.
was the heart and soul
Yeah.
of
She's
the
right.
music
Because
scene.
Guy Street. You coming back soon, right? Because I'll take you down there. We'll drive around.
I want to go there because I've heard it's been, gentrified and, you won't even recognize it.
I have nothing to say because when I drive through in the summer and see the basketball court where we used to go to look for guys, and I see a whole bunch of Asians playing basketball, I said, okay, so much for that.
Times have changed. Okay, I know we're running out of time here, but one question I have to ask Dr. Williams is, I would assume you must have a great sense of pride in terms of the work that you've done. But in terms of what's left to be done, can you give us some pointers in terms of where the scholarship and the research should now be going? I mean, you've ran a race that is so incredible.
And what is the best archives in this city
Whoa.
where we find us really?
Would
I
that
have
be-
a notion, but I'll shut my mouth.
I do too, as an outsider, and I was told I have to go there. But then Andy told me that, no, Phil, the best archives is in Professor Williams' basement. True?
I have an archive in my basement. Yes, I do. Andy knows about it. He started working actually upstairs, but I did introduce him to my massive periodical collection of black newspapers.
Yes, you have to see her do this presentation. That's the last time I saw you when we were at McGill
Oh,
with Senator Cool.
Yes.
And she just had all these newspapers, and
Yes.
I went, being a publicist at the time, I went trippy dippy. It was wonderful.
Yeah, it's quite a large
It
connection.
warrants a tour in and of itself.
Well, I'll tell you, I had some people, I won't mention who, but I had people coming in from Library and Archives Canada who are interested in archives, and I brought them down into my newspaper collection, and their mouths dropped open.
I've been contacted by Library and Archives Canada as well.
But can we trust
I know
them?
what you speak.
Can we trust them only because I say this because I'm almost feeling like a hypocrite. But for a long time, and this was from Dr. Clarence Bain, send your papers, send them to Library and Archives Canada, send, and boxes of stuff. And he's been talking about that.
And they're there.
late.
He sent his archives
and
there.
And
For
Concordia
many of
as
them.
well, right? Mm-hmm. But then we had Harris, and he closed a whole bunch of stuff, and we're seeing that happening to the south of us now. What is the responsible way to preserve these precious artifacts? How
Very
can
good
you
question.
do it?
Very good question.
That's a very good question. Well, I think until we as a community can understand the value of archives in terms of leaving a legacy for our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, we need to, I think, rally around the archives that we have and continue to expand them. I think not just the periodical collection that I have, but the other materials will become so valuable. We're enriching them all the time, or what I said yesterday when our volunteers came together, we're enhancing them. I think it's really important that people are aware that those archives are there and that they continue to contribute their documents. I'll tell you who makes me cry. What happened to the Happy Wanderer?
Listen, baby, off air, I'm going to tell you about that story, okay?
I'm
Leroy the Happy Wanderer, bon vivant par excellence.
I'm not from Montreal, so we,
Here-
Donna's sitting here, we
here-
want to know.
Bon vivant from Trinidad and Tobago, worked as early as the mid-50s at Air
Mid-50s.
Canada.
Yes.
Flew all over the world, but he was a photographer. And he took everybody's picture, every wedding, every cultural event, everything, and wrote poetry and hung out at the Ritz and the Queen Elizabeth and Kontiki. Oh, those drinks and the coconuts at the Kontiki. And took pictures there. He had like 5 prime ministers' photos. Everybody knew him. And then he died, and the materials were part of a family dispute. Which, as I said, I'll tell you, there's sunrise. There's sunrise. Finish your interview, Phil. Look at her face.
Are you kidding me? They identified he had at least 100,000 pictures. I know he had more. I tried working with him for those pictures, right?
We all did.
All right. So I know I wasn't the only one to put in a little in his ear.
But,
No.
Well, look. Finish your interview, Phil.
Oh, my.
Music.
Finish.
Well, listen.
I think we've just really troubled our ants' nest. I think you're going to be here at this station more and more and more and more.
Well, here's my question. I'm getting there. I think, I'm going to say this. I think we're due for another book, Dr. Williams.
Great segue. I'm looking to republish The Road to Now.
Please.
This coming Black History Month.
Good. You heard it on Boom Boom Time first.
And,
Yes.
And we want to send you a personal invitation to Toronto for a book launch of the republishing of this.
Oh, thank you.
It's been documented. I'll witness it.
Okay. All right. So you want me to go to Toronto? You think they'd be interested?
Do I think they'll be interested? What are you saying?
She's a Montreal treasure,
Did I
Phil.
say she's one of one?
Whoa, Nelly, she belongs to Montreal, them Toronto
Well,
big people coming here to steal our people.
We can share her.
All right.
She's one of one.
All righty.
Okay, so
We're ready.
let me say a million thank you for taking the time out. I know you had some meetings you had to get to today, and it certainly wasn't easy getting you here. Montreal is in a state of reconstruction right now, from what I can tell. But we can't thank you enough for breaking it down for us. You were a true legend. I'm going to call you that. And we really appreciate the time you've taken to educate us on Montreal's Black history, not just Black music history. I like to say the music exists within a context, always a context. And it was important to have Professor Williams say to us that, yeah, but there was this and there was that, and complicating it in some ways, but in a good way. And we really respect and appreciate you for that.
I want to ask you, did you have fun?
Yeah, actually, I did have a lot of fun. This was to bring all of this out. Good practice, because I'm teaching this starting the 5th of September at Concordia in my course. I teach a course called Black Montreal. It's the only course taught in Canada on Montreal's Black community. And part of what I teach, because it's not really a history course, is I teach about the arts. I teach about music. I teach about sports. I teach about the embellishment of the Montreal Negro. I teach about slavery. I teach it all.
Could that be recorded and put on YouTube?
Oh, I'm not sure what belongs to the university and what doesn't. But that's interesting, because you're not the only person that's asked if it could be a course online.
And is there carnival in that? Montreal Carnival?
Interestingly, it's an 11-week course. We can never get past Sir George Williams, 1969. So we started 1608-ish, and we go up to 69, and usually we're at the last class of the course. It's only a 3-month course. So, the 11 weeks that we actually work on the history doesn't give us that time to go into the 70s, 80s, 90s. No, unfortunately.
On behalf of the listeners who, as Pat has said, wasn't lighting up her phone about playing music, seems like we have done what we needed to do. Would you agree?
I think so, and I'm glad that we had the foresight to have her on the last day as opposed to the beginning, because it sums up the last 4 days quite nicely.
Dr. Williams, you're a
Thank you.
treasure. Thank you very much.
And thank you.
We're going to play some music right about now. This is Renee Lee. We'll be talking to Renee Lee in just a few minutes.